So the browser, I'll tell you what I remember about the browser. At some point, there was a browser called Netscape Navigator. There was Netscape Navigator, and then there was Internet Explorer. First version of Netscape Navigator had JavaScript written for it very quickly in like a couple weeks as a language. A good amount of time to compose a programming language by this man named Brendan Ike. That Netscape was all about that, whatever. Netscape became Mozilla, right? Because Netscape was going out of business. I think post.com bubble, they were like, they ran out of money or something. And I don't know, they've somehow made it work. The reason why Mozilla makes money is because of that little search thing on the top right of your Firefox or wherever it is now. Every time you do a search in Mozilla Firefox, and that is apparently enough to be Mozilla. So that's one revenue model for a browser. But historically, other than that, there really hasn't been much of a revenue model for a browser. It's always been about like other companies bundling. Like Internet Explorer is a bundled feature of Windows, right? Chrome is from Google, Safari is from Apple. So the reason why these things existed, though, is because you have HTML and then later CSS. I could write code, right? I could write imperative logic. And I could write code that looks like draw, and this is if I'm lucky and I'm able to draw text, right? Draw text at y coordinate 350, or x coordinate 350, y coordinate, I don't know, 100, hello, or like welcome to Sails.js.com. Right? And then I could do more like coordinate by coordinate positioning of, and I say positioning because I'm thinking about it in the browser. It's not even positioning. I'm drawing, if that makes sense. I'm like drawing on the screen. So like draw text at 350, 100. It's like you have a coordinate system, and then that's the coordinate, and then there's text that is written there on the screen. It's not like interactive, and every time if you want to make it interactive, and if you're gonna make games, right, like this is something that comes up, you're doing a draw. So like there's a draw loop that's running over and over and over again, and every time the draw loop runs, you draw on the screen basically. But that's like a lot of work, and the browser, it doesn't luckily make us do that. If it did, then writing HTML would look a lot more like this, where it'd be like imperative and it would just write out exactly what it was going to look like. But instead of being imperative, it's declarative, right? So I can put h1 welcome to Sails.js.com or whatever. What is a client in the context of like the browser? So that in our world, client is a thing that sends HTTP requests / possibly establishes WebSocket connections. But for 99.9% of everything that you'll ever do, and likely in this line of work, by the fact that we sort of specialize in real time, it's still going to be HTTP. Like sockets they have very specific utility for like chat features, basically. So on the back end, when we hear the word back end versus front end, and we hear the word server side versus client side, Rachel, what does that mean to you?
So server side, that's like what is sending back the data when you make a request. It's like that's being handled by the back end, whereas like client side, that's the same as front end. And that's the logic that's running on the page. It's not dependent on receiving it from somewhere else.
Yep, that was good. What is one way you can make an HTTP request?
The browser, search navigation bar at the top, website address, or just give a key term nowadays. The browser will recognize that as well.
Gotcha. So I'm telling this browser about some word, and then it's presumably going to make a request, an HTTP request. So let's just go to a website that's not going to likely to be porn, which is scary if you're just guessing. Maybe example.com. So let's look at what just happened. I'm going to refresh this. When we navigated here, only one request was made. And that's always true technically. The difference is when you go to like Sails.js.com, and I'll pick on our website because it's easy to get to. There's a bunch of shit. Most of this is from script tags and different things on the page. Like this is from like an iframe likely that Twitter's using to insulate itself on the page. It's like the Twitter widget. But really at the end of the day, if you're trying to filter this out, you can call this the doc or the document request. So they call this the document. Why? Well, that first request that you make that gets the HTML, kind of hard to guess, is like it's a text file. This is a request for a text file. You see this picture. But if you open it with text edit, unless that started rendering images too, something looks more like this. That's like the HTML, you can think of it for this image. This is like the document. This is text. The fact that it happens to be an image here, Well, that's just because it knows that it's a PNG file. However, if I was going to copy and paste this image, and let's say I got rid of this, and I'm going to do it like in here because sometimes Finder hides things from you. We've got this Junie Morrison bread alone copy. I'm going to make Junie no extension. I could do .ping, right? In fact, I'll start with that, but then I'll do move Junie.ping to Junie. I'll rename it to just Junie, and I'll try to open it. Somehow it still knows, and that's because Mac is just looking at the operating system is looking at that thing we were just staring at a second ago. So like it doesn't matter what the hell the little dot whatever it is at the end of the file. That's just a name. Like it's a way you can clue the operating system to know how to open it, but it's just a name. The contents of the file, like the reason why macOS knew to do what it did is because something about this crap tells it. So you can see the word, ping there. Maybe it's that. So when we talk about like the document object model, and you can see that it's a document request, it's not by accident that we keep using that word document. It's like fundamental to what's going on behind the scenes. Okay, so this is our request. We made a request. We sent a request to example.com. Because it's coming from this browser thing in the browser, it's a GET request. And then you can see, I'm going to ignore the response for a second. We automatically sent all of these headers just by nature of using the browser to send the request. I'm just going to talk through them so you guys will have heard what they all mean. Accepts tells the server what kind of data might work. So for a browser, that's usually specifically for the use case of typing in the URL bar. The most common, what do we expect to get back? When I type in the URL bar, what kind of data would I expect to come back to me in the response over the wire?
HTML.
Right. So that's what when we go to example.com, what we expect to get back, the string that we expect to receive, because every response is a string always, no matter what. We may think about it as other things, but it's always just a string. The string we expect to get back is an HTML string. This is me saying, hey waiter, I accept escargot. Or it's like, hey waiter, I want to order the escargot, I accept gluten. So and then it's a comma separated list, so it actually accepts XHTML plus XML. That's there for historical reasons. Other browsers used to have weird rules. Basically, before everyone was just like, okay, it's just going to be HTML and like it's its own thing. Everyone was like, no, it's actually a special form of XML, except there's all these weird exceptions that we have to maintain backwards compatibility for because people have been using image tags without closing them for 10 years. Right? We can't break every website that's ever existed. So that's whenever you see like XHTML or XML in the context of HTML, it's that legacy of just people feeling like it had all the tags had to match. More XML, and you can see it's just talking about all kinds of stuff in here. And then it's saying another option, I don't know what this Q means. It likes WebP images, APNG images, and actually it'll tolerate, I think that means it'll tolerate anything. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, these are like priorities. So this is like, hey, this is what I really want. But hypothetically, like with a 90% weight, let's say, if you were to send back a WebP image or an APNG image or anything else, then I'll tolerate that too. And then it's saying, and by the way, if you wanted to send back whatever the fuck application/signed exchange format is, send that back. So I don't know how this works. I could find out. You guys don't need to know how this works any more than I do, really. And most headers are that way. Basically, the way every request consists of three things. Every request, HTTP request, consists of headers, which are just these guys formatted in a certain way where they can be parsed. It also consists of a URL and method, so get example.com. And then it also consists of potentially of a request body. In this case, it doesn't. So like get requests never have a body. The reason why body is special and it's not just another header, because why wouldn't it be, right? That would work totally fine. The reason it's special is because sometimes the body has to get real big, like when you upload a file, right? So if you're uploading a 1 terabyte file, you can't have that be a header. Right? You can't even fit it in your computer's memory all at one time to crunch it into a header, much less like send that somehow. So that's why body is separate. The body can be encoded in all sorts of crazy ways. Each header can be encoded in all sorts of crazy ways. You can make your own custom headers and encode or decode them however you want. They really are just anything. Except encoding is real similar to how accept works, except it's like even lower level. It's saying like, hey server, if you know how to do like gzip, then me, the user agent, aka the browser, the client, I'm going to say, hey, if you were to send me gzip back somehow and communicate that to me, then I'm gonna like unzip it, and that way we don't have to send uncompressed shit over the wire, and we can save money on bandwidth. So that's what this one's about. Accept language is for internationalization. So in your browser's language settings, you choose like, okay, US English or Latin American Spanish or something. Then that language becomes your browser preference, and it's going to be sent every time you send a request from the browser. It's going to have an accept language header that has that language. So if someone asks a question about internationalization in Sails and they're like, how do I do it? The main thing is that most of it's like already there by nature of how the browser works. Like what it is for us usually is like, okay, I'm going to look at that header and then I'm going to serve something different. Cache control is more to do with how the browser caches things. Connection keep alive, I forget. Host, this one can be trusted if you know. If this is a request from a browser, you can trust what that is always. But if you don't know for sure that this request came from a browser, that can be, like anything else in a request, it can be spoofed. But if you happen to trust this request, or maybe it doesn't matter whether you trust it or not, that'll tell you what website someone in a browser was on as or before they sent the request. The reason I say that is because there's other kinds of requests you can make besides typing in your URL bar. If I'm on Sails.js.com and I make an AJAX request to example.com, to a different domain, then I think in this case, the host would still be the AJAX target, example.com. So bear that in mind, but that's what it's for. It's so you can know where it came from. Pragma, I forget what the fuck that means. Upgrade insecure request, that's one that actually matters. And what that means, I think, oh no, I don't actually know what it means. I think it has to do with SSL and HTTPS. User agent, this is the one that you'll probably interact with the most often. This says, hey, the client, the user agent, what kind of thing is it? Again, it can be spoofed, it can be pretended. If I send a request from Postman, the user agent might be Postman. If I send a request from some weird-ass script I'm writing, the user agent could be weird-ass scripts. In this case, it's like we're using Chrome. Why does it say Mozilla? Well, compatibility, basically. This user agent string, this is the default Chrome user agent string. It talks about Mozilla, it talks about Apple, it talks about WebKit, it talks about KHTML, which is, I forget what K stands for, but Gecko is a reference to Mozilla's JavaScript engine. It's a clusterfuck in there. And so basically user agents from browsers are just crazy, and we use a library called Bowser to sniff it out. And that's it. Those are the request headers. There's all kinds of different ones, and sometimes you'll see custom ones. By convention, custom headers often start with X. So it'll be like SX X Walmart mobile app version.
Some pages request to use a certain browser, and they can see through your user agent like which one you're using, so you could spoof that and then just trick the web page into letting you use an unsupported browser.
Right. Because the server doesn't know what browser you're using. All it knows is what you sent as a user agent header in your request. Image, script, and link tags. So we know when a page loads, or basically when you navigate to a URL, we're sending a request to example.com. If there was an image on this website in the HTML, what would happen next? And I can add an image tag. And now it shows me the Sails logo. But I didn't type a bunch of this stuff in, right? Which means somehow it was able to it went to this URL, right? Yeah, so this is, if we look now, there's actually a second request, which I don't think it's gonna reveal to us because we're filtering by only document requests. So I'm gonna go here and I'm gonna choose all, or I could choose images, but I'll choose all. And then I'll see we sent a request to Sails.js.com images. Original logo.pg. Now that's not what we typed. Why is it showing us that? Well, because behind the scenes it did a redirect. So if I went to, in fact here, all right, images logo.png. I'm gonna click preserve log. Actually, yeah, so I'm gonna choose preserve log, and this will make it so it doesn't clear out this information every time we do a request. And we're gonna navigate to this. Okay, and you can see that first it sent a request to what I actually asked it to, which is Sails.js.com images logo.png. The server responded with a 302 status code, which implies a temporary redirect. The way that the server tells us that it's a redirect is the response actually has a header called location, And the browser just happens to know, hey, that location header, I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to navigate to that instead. So then it did here, and then we got a 200 response. And right, so if you just put the kind of shorthand notation for redirect in the routes file in Sails, it's going to do a 302, aka temporary redirect. That's almost the same as a permanent redirect, a 301. The only difference is how search engines. So, okay, the reason why we did that together is because that's how image tags work. Script tags and link tags actually work the almost exact same way. So John, what does the script tag load? If an image tag loads an image, what kind of data? Sorry, I'll put it this way. If an image tag loads a ping or a JPEG, what kind of data does a script tag load?
JavaScript.
JavaScript, right? For all intents and purposes, these days, always JavaScript. In the early days, the reason why scripts have a type is because there wasn't always just JavaScript. It was JScript and other browser scripting languages. And there was even a way to tap that into like Java applets back in the day. So the same question then to you, Madison, except for link tags. What kind of data do link tags load? The CSS.
CSS.
Right.
Is that always true of like?
Always.
Always.
In every time I've ever done it, and I think honestly just like nowadays it's always like it may have been intended at some point, like there's you put link rel style sheet and you do have to put that because I think there are maybe other things you can kind of link to, but I just so link tags and script tags, they work the same way as images. Like it makes a request to here after the page has loaded or as part of loading the page. When I say it, I mean the browser.
Was it style sheets for any kind of web page through linked?
Yeah, it's kind of like doing the import thing, I guess, and stuff. Yeah, it's doing, so after this HTML loads, the browser's loaded the HTML. The browser starts crawling through your HTML, and it's like, hey, what's this thing? Oh, it's an image tag? Okay, image src what? I'm going to navigate to that URL, I'm going to fetch that image, and then I'm going to get ready to display it in some way, or do something with it. With JavaScript, we fetch it, and then we run it. We evaluate the code. With CSS, we fetch it and then we interpret it in a special way. We sort of like evaluating it, but we interpret it much in the same way we're interpreting the HTML. So if you ever see a website, Flash is like all it's like all unformatted, and then all of a sudden it's because the CSS hasn't loaded yet.
Wait, so the link tag just gets the style sheet.
That's right.
But where does the rest of it come from? Because the style sheet just styles the content, right?
That's right.
So where does the content come from?
So the content on this page, for example, this came from us sending a request to example.com, and it responded with an HTML response. So let's find an example, because this is the sales website, right? This is the HTML for the sales website. That's what I got when I visited Sails.js.com.
Yeah.
If I was to not visit Sails.js.com, and I was to instead visit Sails.js.com/dists, if I was to go to this URL instead, this is what I get instead, the CSS file. As your browser receives all this HTML here, it starts parsing it out. That's what the browser's like code is doing internally. And when it hits a link tag, it's like, oh, I know about those. I'm going to send a request to this thing. And you see there's no Sails.js.com in front of it. That's just by convention, right? It's a root relative URL. So we happen to be on Sails.js.com. This is starting with a slash. Therefore, even if we were on a page, Sails.js.com foo bar.html or something, then because I'm doing a root relative URL, this would it would go all the way back up to the root of the domain and do. Okay.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when it grabs this file, the browser code looks at it and starts interpreting the CSS, and then it knows as it builds the DOM, as it interprets the HTML, it kind of like layers on. It re-renders everything that it's done so far, but it adds on that CSS that it loaded from that other URL.
It's basically so you don't have to just take all those styles and merge it into the HTML file at the same time.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. Because you could put it in line. Like you could just put all your CSS like this if you wanted, and it would never make that other request. It would just use, the browser sees this, it sees a style tag, and it's like, okay, I'm going to interpret all these styles, and I'm going to apply them to the HTML. The browser is not going line 1, line 2, line 3. The browser at this point has already read your entire HTML, right? It's like, and it's parsing it like a tree, where it's starting from like, okay, here's the body. I'm going to like basically draw a div. I'm going to track that into my internal representation of what's on this web page. I'm going to draw a heading, same deal. I'm going to draw a paragraph tag. which is that. So when you click the link tag,
Mhm.
when you say, okay, the word link is probably what's throwing off here, I think. If I can't click a link tag, right?
Right, but the link tag wraps.
This href, if I navigate to
That's
that,
something else.
you're thinking
This
about an
is
anchor
different
tag.
from A.
It is, which is fucking
Oh.
confusing.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay, never
yes.
mind. I take everything that
Pretty
I
funny
just
word
wrote
choice.
back. I'm no longer confused.
If this was an anchor tag, then yeah, it would be.
Okay.
It would just be like any other element.
Yeah.
Right?
They should have just called it style sheet source.
Shoulda, woulda, coulda.
It's fine.
Link
20
is-
years later,
Yeah.
millions, billions of websites later.
Whenever I see the A, I think, oh, that's a link. Like, that's a link tag.
Yeah.
We use the link tag now.
Yeah.
But as
Yeah.
it turns out, there's a whole other tag called link tag.
That also uses
Different
href.
thing.
Confusingly
Yep,
uses
yep.
href.
Oh,
Yeah.
too, as well.
God. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's a nightmare.
Also an href in there.
Which, despite working almost exactly the same as this, you don't call it script href, you call it script src.
Source.
That's how it goes.
So scripts are like those big like image tags, I guess.
They all behave like image tags. Really, they do. It's just, okay, link and script tags, you always put them in like the head or at the very bottom of the body.
Mhm.
They don't have like a physical manifestation in the DOM. Some blueprint, whatever, just tractor, I don't know. This thing here, it has some shit on it that's like this is like this like headlight thing. This is like an A tag. And maybe this thing is like this tire, it's like a div, right?
Mhm.
But you see this little thing that says kg by 1000. Just looking at that by itself, I know it's part of the graph, just ignore that. That's like a link tag. It's like it's not going to translate into something physically real in the DOM, but it's not going to inhabit space, but it is sort of in the blueprint and it communicates information.
Yeah, no.
Cool. All right. Well, I won't belabor the point on that any further. That's important just to kind of like start thinking about the HTML as this document, right? It's this blueprint.
Yeah.
Okay, what is an HTML element? Really, I think we're good. Markup. Why is my HTML sometimes called markup, and why is it sometimes called a template, and why is it sometimes called a view? Markup is a great way to communicate. Like if you see markup, you're almost always saying HTML.
Okay.
It's pretty unambiguous. I'm sure that there's exceptions to that people use that word for other things. View can be really misleading, and it's one of the regrets. I don't regret having Sails have the concept of views, but I regret not getting rid of it and calling it something else. Template is a good way to think about it. It's a little bit more than a template. Like template usually implies that you're going to take some data and you're going to like hydrate that template, and you're going to have a result, which is, Mad Libs. Like Mad Lib is a template. You put your funny words in there, and it spits out something else. HTML is not really as much of a template, except in the context of a framework, because a lot of times that's what happens on personalized websites. Takes your name and slaps it in the top right corner. What is an attribute in HTML?
Like something that is on the tag itself. So if you had like H1, cat equals Rory, like that's an attribute, even though it doesn't really mean anything right now. But
Does everybody see
you
that?
can reference that like in the JavaScript or something.
Right, you could. It exists
Or
in the DOM
styles,
still.
you could do like style, an element that's in like a bracket, cat equals Rory.
This is just to give you guys more of that story, okay, more of that context. I didn't have to put all that shit.
Yeah.
Doc
Yeah,
type,
I don't need that.
HTML, I don't need any of that because none of that fucking matters. You know why? Because like in 1993, certain browsers, it didn't matter. That's why.
Yeah.
So, and like, yeah, there's a lot of shit like that. Like you don't need, like sometimes if you don't put a doc type, it can like trigger older browsers to enter safe mode, and there's all of this crazy stuff, and it would change the way you wrote styles for it. That mostly went away circa like 2013. This is technically called a text node.
Oh yeah, the text.
Text node, this is like an H1 node, but the element, this is not technically an element. You gotta have the greater than sign, less than sign
And
to
then
be
if you had
an
another
element.
element inside there, then like welcome would be a text node, and then whatever like if you had a span inside there, then like whatever's inside the span would be a separate text node.
Oh.
Right. Okay, what is a rule in CSS and less? What is this? It's called selector.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so CSS selector. Let's do it this way. Cat name.
Yeah, that looks more simple.
Okay, cool. So then class equals star equals equivalent to this.
So if you change that to be cat name dashboard.
Normal flow. It's about display block. It's about display inline. It's about what that really means in the browser. And it's also about the box model. Because normal flow in the box model, like it's like how are things positioned? How does the browser understand them existing in space? If this was a video game world, it's like how do the collisions work between objects in this world? You don't even you can get by without using floats at all these days. But there's a bunch of weird rules related to how floats work, and they're like their own topic. And inevitably, you will see and interact with them for sure in your day-to-day lives. And then last but not least of the three is positioning. Here it is, and z-index. So this is when you need to break out of the box model. Or not the box model. You need to break out of the normal flow of the document. You need to say, hey, I am no longer going to have just a div that's like formatted as if the whole thing was a Microsoft Word document. Like I need to manually do X and Y coordinate positioning. That's what absolute positioning is about. Okay, so with that, in we go to normal flow. Normal flow is basically, it describes what it is like to be inside of a Microsoft Word document and to see and to have like images in that Microsoft Word document. I'm going to use Google Docs because it's pretty much the same thing. So I'm in this document right now. You can see that there's margins, right? Sound familiar? I can type words like hi. I can even do like special headings. I can insert images. What is it that makes this hi be on a different line than hello? It has a line break, but that's not what caused it per se. It's because this is a heading, right? Whereas this is normal text. So if I can put line breaks, this here is like kind of like a p tag. It's like one of these. But this is like a BR. Because that's just like a manual line break. BR is kind of neither inline nor block. We'll get to it in a second. Like BR is sort of like a thing you can do to make inline stuff display differently. Whenever you hear inline, is that it flows in line with the normal flow of the document or in line with the text. Display inline equals text, basically. It means it's going to behave like text. Anytime you see display inline, you can just understand that to mean, oh, it'll display like it's text. This doesn't necessarily seem that important at first, other than the fact that we live in this world where the browser is basically a Microsoft Word document, right? It starts to matter more, or basically the first time it matters is when you want to center something. So when I have this word there, I can text align center it, and it is now, I'm saying text align center it. I'm sorry, I can click here and press this button, which in Google Docs means to center. What does it actually mean to center, right? What is it gonna center if I put my cursor right in the middle of the word there and I hit this button? The word there. What about now if I do it? Alt text on that line. Gotcha. Alt text, and let's say alt text within that block or that box, right? And we can't really see it, but you can kind of imagine like there's something going on here. There's like a box around that high there.
Yeah.
Non-breaking space. So like, have you guys seen this kind of thing before?
Oh, that's what that means.
It is, correct.
Yeah.
Cool.
So I actually edited text in here, which is weird. So that's actually
Oh,
what
yeah.
the browser, the Chrome inspector converted what I typed into that. I'm going to fix it. And I'm not even going to talk about non-breaking space anymore because it's confusing. Let's talk about this and amp. That is an HTML entity. Another one, another game changer, by the way, is how sometimes you type that? You can also type option semicolon and it does an ellipses character. But whether or not we can produce these characters is not why we need HTML entities. See, I can go here to like one of these things or Mojopedia and I can like look up m dash.
Yeah.
And I can just paste that.
Yep. I have that.
Like a little like horizontal arrows.
But I'm pretty sure it's the same as option dash at this point. Great. So we talked about HTML entities. I guess the point is that they're no longer really needed because you can just copy and paste the character in there if you wanted to. Normal flow is the way by which a web page is like a Microsoft Word document and or the way by which individual parts of a web page operate. And or how web pages really just want to be Microsoft Word documents. Like they really want to be that. If you're ever confused about why something isn't working, remember that it just wants to be a Microsoft Word document. And we'll talk more about that when we get to positioning at the end of this journey, about how you kind of have ultimate control at the end of the day. But imagine generally like, and it'll behoove you to like imagine you live inside of a Microsoft Word document. It is constraining and causes you to like do things to make it work. But it is generally a lot less work than if you had to do everything by hand. A lot of it because of the centering, right? The centering and the boxes and stuff. So here's our puppy that we have here. Let's create this exact same thing in the browser. So what we have is like basically like a p tag with some centered text in it. We have an h1 and then we have a puppy. So I'm just gonna do one of, oh, look at that. So there's a head, and this is like one of those things in the blueprint that doesn't actually make it into the house. And then this body is like usually where the goodies that actually make it into the house as real world objects get. The title is how at the top of the blueprint it says, my house. So let's start by describing this here.
Paragraph tag. Just to start with that.
Cool. So how would I center the text high there?
Just text align center.
Where would I put that rule? What selector would I use to apply that rule?
The paragraph selector.
Okay, why? Why don't I just put it on body?
Because then it will apply, or it will attempt to apply it to everything in the body.
Everything is the point we're getting to. Yeah, will it center everything?
The code of the image.
Yeah, cool. Bring that image with the selector, and let's give it a fixed width. So let's now try just to get it out of our system. Let's stick a text line center in the body.
Never really tried this before.
The way that this behaves is important. Very important.
Oh,
It does work.
Centers the images.
Everything. Okay, so let's keep trying things. So. Okay. A display lock element, which we could use to demonstrate this. It doesn't have text on the inside. Let's make a div underneath the puppy. And let's put a little word in there, okay? Just any text inside of the div. Notice how nothing surprising is there. Not surprising. Great. Now let's give that div some visible dimensions by assigning it a background color. Now let's see how big it is too. Perfect. Can you make it a little bit easier to see on the monitor? abilities. Right. Thank you. Okay, awesome. So now we can see exactly where the edges of that element are. You can see the touch. Do you guys understand what CSS reset is? So if you open this in Firefox, that distance might be slightly different. That's the default margin that exists. Much in like our Word document, how there's that margin.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Every browser has its own little intricacies. And also keep in mind anytime you're playing around with this, there are weird rules. In this case, it looks like it's actually the same. There's actually even different ways that browsers work, just outside of the spec. The spec's supposed to lock them down. The W3 spec, W3C spec. Yeah. W3C spec was like when there was Netscape Navigator and there was Internet Explorer, Netscape Navigator wasn't making a lot of money for Netscape, and they were like started to have more of an engineering culture as they hemorrhaged money, I think, at the end, and they were basically like, okay, well, we didn't fail. What we did is we wrote things to web standards. That's where Mozilla sort of originated from, I guess, and it also is where web standards originated from. Everyone was afraid of like Microsoft having all these vendor-specific styles and ways of doing things, and then not actually like it's really hard as a developer to write apps when you have to write them two different ways. That's why you need a CSS reset. CSS reset.
Yeah, see, this has a little more padding by default than this one. Slight variations. Form elements are where it's easiest to see it. Drop downs are where it's easiest to see it specifically. Yeah.
And it doesn't reset everything, right? So drop downs, if you go to mobile Safari, it's like a little wheel at the bottom of the screen that you sort of slide through. It doesn't actually look like a drop down at all. You click it, an action sheet slides up from the bottom, and you slide through this wheel to pick your option, and you select it, and you hit done. So that's what drop downs happen to be implemented like on mobile Safari. We're not going to try to normalize all that shit because that's what is good for that. You know, that's what people were used to in that operating system and stuff.
Oh, these look closer than usual.
The operating system drives the native UI elements much more than the browser does. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
With a few exceptions, with like bundled versions of Android that had bundled browsers from like LG or whatever the fuck, because that was bad for a while.
Yeah.
That's mostly gone away. So the operating system usually drives what those native UI elements look like. It's the browser that drives that tiny 1 pixel difference that might exist in the padding. Right? And that's what we want to solve with CSS reset. CSS reset, generally, like we used to use one that would just like eliminate all margins at all. They were there by default, giving you a clean slate to work with, so there are no surprises. These days with Bootstrap has one built in, and it doesn't do that. It just kind of like normalizes it. So we're talking about this div, and we see that it says you're doing great, puppy. That's align centered. Hi there and hello are all centered. Even that image is centered. Even that drop down field is centered. If you put text align center on the image tag, it would do absolutely nothing. Yeah. You put it on the ancestor, and that propagates down to all display inline elements that exist within that thing. So because we put it on body, it's propagating down. So like now all display inline elements that don't have text align overridden, they're all going to be text align center now. So then, Rachel, would you wrap everything inside of the body in a container div? Obviously, the fact that it has class containers doesn't mean anything, right? We're just doing that so we can more easily read it. Okay. Instead of body, let's change that to be the container. Now, if puppy stuff was more like puppy image container, then that would actually not be a hack. That would be probably that's a totally valid way to go about it. Right? I mean, that's probably not how we would do it because most of the time we're going to change images to be display block. Because it makes them behave more like what they look like, which is a block and not text. Right now, that image looks like text. So Rachel, would you do the newspaper thing around it? So that text, of which the image is technically a part because it's display inline by default, and the browser images are what kind of display by default?
Display inline.
That's right. That is display inline. It is inline with text. It is text for our text purposes. Right before this, we were looking at this div that we added, and we were like, I mean, so far so good. Everything is kind of making sense. Can you get rid of this extra text, Rachel? And then let's try giving a width to our pink div.
It's not gonna be centered. That's what I think.
Because div is not a display inline element.
But then the
Let's
text
make
within
it-
it is centered within the div.
So,
Because everything is text align center by
If
default.
you are an inline element, then you look up to your nearest ancestor that has text align specified, and you use that text align regardless of where you are. So let's make puppy support display inline instead of being display block implicitly. Certain elements are display inline, certain other elements are display block. Luckily, that does not vary between browsers.
interesting and overlapping.
So now our pink puppy support div is flowing in line with the text. It is display inline.
Mhm. And the padding's being all weird because, you know.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
the padding is being all weird because, I don't know about you, I have no fucking clue. I have no why that padding's being all weird. And that's why we don't ever put padding on display inline images.
Okay.
Or display inline
Makes sense.
anything. If it's display inline, I mean, you can try, you can get away with it probably,
Yeah.
but it gets margin, especially with margin. Like, if you start doing boxy things to display inline things, you're starting to get more and more into the territory of like, is that going to work in like
Yeah, 'cause
Safari 14?
certain elements, like, it won't
yeah.
work for, or like,
Interesting.
it will partially, like, in this case, it kind of like partially work. I don't know.
Pretty much experience is gonna reveal that one. Like,
It doesn't. I'm telling you, on the other side, it still doesn't. And in fact, what I've learned is to never. You don't want to spend your time. That's not the kind of experience you want to have.
just stay away from adding an inline. Yeah.
Now, sometimes it can be helpful for things to be like text, but still look like blocks, and be able to have like padding and stuff applied to them without being confusing. Before we do that, let's go ahead and so display inline. It's all on one line, right?
Mm-hmm.
Except why is hello not on the same line? We give hello a background color. So knowing what we've learned so far, someone can guess for me. Why would hello not be on the same line as the puppy? You can figure out the answer to the question I just asked any time on any website if you want. If you go open the inspector and you're looking at it there, right? And then you go, okay, I don't want to see the styles that it's inheriting. I want to see the computed DOM properties of this thing. And then I'm going to look display block. H1s, H2s, all the H's, P's, divs, block quotes.
H1
Those are all display block
by
by default.
default is getting set to 32 pixels, 700 font weight.
Oh, for the font, yeah.
Yeah.
That's also something that the CSS reset usually
Yeah.
does, is fix the fonts so they match between different browsers. It's display block, so is this, right? So if we gave this a background color, I'll finally use your image font. All right. You can see that it's not in there either. It's not like display inline. But if I force it to be display inline, which you really shouldn't do because it's confusing, right? But just for the sake of understanding it, it's all on one line. It's all literally, that's the normal flow of the document, is it flows like text. That's what normal flow means. What is normal flow? Text. It's like being in Microsoft Word. Normal flow is, it's literally like being on one line of text before you hit enter. That's normal flow. There's ways to break out of the normal flow. Display block is the first such way, let's say, to break out of the normal flow. So let's reawaken our display blockness. What did that do? Well, it made it so this cannot be on the same line. In practice, it made it so that there's like, this is now kind of its own block, right? The body is display block, right? It's like, there's like one block, but now there's like, this is not, I mean, this here is not even a block, but it's acting like it's a block.
I mean, essentially, like the rest of the stuff on the page, it's like water. Like if you stick something in a bowl of water, like the water's going to just like go around it because like it's going to behave according to like anywhere that it can go, that
Ooh,
it's
I
not
like
like
that.
forbidden from going,
Yeah.
or that's not being prevented from going
Right.
by like these other rules.
That's super good. Yeah, display block elements displace the normal flow of the document. This is displacing the normal flow. I can have more shit above it. I can have like another lots of stuff, some like loose text, and like it's up there, but like this, why is it not jammed right up against that like little yellow thing? Well, it's just because of the CSS reset. That's why it's so fucking confusing sometimes. So let's just do margin 0. There we go. That's a lot easier to follow. That's all CSS reset's doing mainly is like stuff like this. Yeah, ripping it out.
So like you might also see stuff that's using normalize, and that's like, and the main difference between that and CSS reset is like a CSS reset is just like getting rid of default styles, and then like normalize just makes it the same across browsers.
Right. CSS reset, we talked about that. We cleared the margins. You can see that this shit's jammed right up against there. This display block element is displacing the normal flow of the document. But then once it's done being a block, it just resumes being text. The contents of any display block element are always a new world of normal flow. If I'm doing a hi there, Leona, the contents in here are really part of the same normal flow as this. I could do an M tag and it'll be italics, but this is all like one normal flow. Hi there, Leona. Okay.
Good girl, Leona.
So you're doing great puppy as a div. It has a fixed width. What happens before it had a fixed width? 100% width, right? It's the same as, I think, probably, hopefully it's always the same as that. I'm pretty sure that 100% width is the same thing as having no width.
Well, okay,
Yeah,
actually, in this case, not necessarily because it has padding.
Very important. Let's fix that as part of our reset. Okay. Box sizing, border box, and then, okay, you mentioned already, Rachel, the difference between width auto, which is what we have right now. This is the rules it has. The computed is like what it currently is, right? Mm-hmm. This is like the route. This is like the request URL. Okay, so width 500 pixels.
One of the most important things to know.
And this is, you'll hear called the box model, this concept. Luckily, the Chrome Inspector has this picture built in now, which is really cool. Okay.
Oh yeah, that's weird.
So we use set width 500 pixels for this guy. So like that is 500 pixels, but there's 10 pixels of padding all around it. So how many pixels wide would we expect it to be? You can see though it says 480 instead, and that's because we put this crap up here. So if I refresh this now, see it's 520. But if you use this thing, which Bootstrap does, and which even without Bootstrap you'll always want to, because it's really good.
No reason not to.
Yeah. With 100%, there it is. What the fuck? Look at this. Right. That's because I got rid of border box.
Oh,
Yeah.
Because now it's 100% of the width except 20 pixels. Okay. So I'll bring that back though, and now it's smart, which is so good because as you resize your browser, you can have like width 100% or whatever, and then the browser will figure out, okay, those 10 pixels you want of padding, like I'll make sure that it fits in there.
Oh yeah.
And since it's border box, not content box, that border you have, that 1 pixel border, is not going to cause there to be a scroll bar anymore. So I'm going to say for our purposes for now, and let's correct me if I'm wrong here, Rachel, that width auto and width 100% are going to be the same as if you have border box enabled.
Yeah.
Cool. So that's for display block elements. Okay. If you're giving something a fixed width, chances are you want it to be a display block element or inline block. If it's not, then it might work. I mean, for an image it works. Also, images have special rules because of compatibility reasons in browsers. Like if this image is working, and like you can usually, if you put dimensions on a display inline element, like it'll work. It's just how everything else around it behaves that may be surprising. Because remember, it's text, right? So like, how is the line height going to work when you type the letter T, puppy, F? And like, it's just weird. Okay. So, right, we covered width, we covered padding. I'll even give it a border. Okay, and no scroll bars, everything's great. So, but when we give this a fixed width, there's a problem. the puppy or that thing is not centered
Yeah.
anymore. How do we center it? Well, first, why is it not centered? Because it's display block. Because it's not reacting to the text align center effect on its ancestor. So with 500 pixels, great. Now that we have a non 100% width, we can see that it's not centered. So we're going to give it, we want to assign a new rule to it. So it's not going to work, but I want to, so text align center is not working, right? Let's try text align left and watch what happens. Because text align only applies to the descendants of whatever it is you're putting text align on. Text align means center my inline, my display inline descendants. So because it doesn't, it's completely non-intuitive what you have to do. But let's talk about what you have to do. In practice, this is probably the best way to write it because it makes it super clear without accidentally doing anything else.
Yeah.
What I used to always write was this because I was always doing, basically once I realized that like margins or what margins are, which is fucking crazy, and they collapse into each other and they have weird behavior that you should try to avoid whenever possible. You can pretty much always avoid them, except for this use case, which is centering a block element, a block level element. Why I say the word block level, I don't know. I don't even know if that's the correct terminology. A display block element, let's say, you want its left and right margins to be auto, which causes it to be centered. I don't remember why. You don't ever have to know, luckily. Probably wouldn't hurt to know, but I wouldn't worry too much about it. So what this is doing, since there's only two of them, is like, hey, north-south get 0 and west-east, or east-west get auto. Another way to write the same thing would be that, right? Or what we did before. So I won't belabor the point. Why would you need to center a block level element? So it's a margin left, margin right, auto, container.
Stretches all the way across.
There's our breakpoint.
A lot of queries.
Yeah, and like the image is not getting bigger or smaller, but it's,
That's awesome.
We'll talk about vertical centering because for some reason it always just is where our brain goes next. You're doing great. Puppy is already vertically centered. Or vertically middled, maybe we could say. Why is it vertically middled? It's because it is not already so wide that it takes up all of the space, which is the default for a block. So as soon as you do that, as soon as you assign a fixed width, the problem becomes, oh, now I have to figure out where it's going to sit. Similarly, for vertical centering, vertical middling, let's say, it's in order to make it possible, I know that if I wanted to center this puppy, and this is obvious when you see it in the browser, it's like, well, it has to be inside of something, it has to be centered, middled within something. Right? In the HTML, it's a lot easier to like lose track of that, and you're like, oh my god, why can't I center this puppy? What the fuck? And like, the key is every single parent, all the way up, the div, in this case, the body, no matter how many levels of parents there are, every one of those parents also has to have a fixed height. It can be 100%. That's fine. But it has to have a height. It can't have auto. So the way that you middle something, we'll do it together. Let's middle this puppy. What are we going to middle the puppy within? Let's do puppy stuff. So puppy stuff is going to be background, I don't know, like a light gray. Okay. So I want to center the puppy within its container. There's our puppy. Now I'm doing anything with it. So what is the first thing I'm going to do? I'm going to make it display block because I don't trust anything display inline once I start getting cute. I made a display block. It broke. Someone tell me how to fix it.
Give it a margin auto as well.
Like that?
Like technically it should work. Yeah.
That technically should work. I agree. Let's make it 0 autos because we don't
Just in
trust
case.
anybody. Okay. Yeah. You never know when there's going to be a new version of Firefox that clearly have some scar tissue. Hopefully you guys have never had those bad experiences, but like, okay, so there's the image. There it is centered. All right. I want to middle this image. First thing you're going to want to type is there's vertical line. All right, middle. I'll just type that. What does that do? Nothing at all. Meaningless. So instead, what we'll do, of course, is display table cell. And nothing, which what it is it's an entirely different thing because display table and display table cell have their own rules. Display table cell, it didn't break anything, but I don't ever do like just that. Don't trust that. Who knows? The div, which is, I'm gonna put, actually, normally I know we don't do this, but I'm gonna write, Rachel, what is puppy stuff? That's a container.
Yeah.
Okay, puppy container. I'm just gonna call it puppy container.
Oh yeah.
Easier to tell. But everything got fucked up. I don't understand, right? So I'm gonna, when in doubt, whenever I see something like that happen, I'm like, okay. But I'm gonna change this one to be called puppy image container. When in doubt, be verbose or specific. All right, and that's just gonna hold the image and nothing else. And then I'm gonna go up here and I'm gonna say puppy image container. And I'm going to say display table, and then this image is display table cell. And now everything else is well behaved. Our puppy is all broke, but that's because this is display block now. Oh wait, oops. Yeah, that shouldn't matter though. I don't know how display table cell works. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to take it off, and I'm going to do puppy image container insides. And I'm gonna do, and this is a pattern. Feel free to use all the time. It's nice and safe. And when in doubt, I would much rather clutter up my shit like this and fully understand how it works. Okay. So margin 0 auto. Then let's pull it out to this thing. If we're concerned about how do I center a display table thing, you do just wrap it in one more thing and make that display block. It seems to work though. Here. Display table is real damn similar to display block. Display table cell is where it gets different. And that's because before CSS existed, people used to make websites with HTML tables. Yeah. And so there started to be all these vendor-specific rules in Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator to be able to like TDTR, like GeoCities websites being generated and the whole thing. Now we can use this vertical line property. We need to make it bigger, I realize.
Yeah, give the
height, right?
It's just kind of odd that they never really chose to have a horizontal line.
You would think, well, I mean, for that matter, you would think horizontal align would work for things that are not. Because text align, right? Yeah. Text align is actually, it does exactly what it says.
Yeah, exactly.
Vertical align, let's comment that out for a second. Okay, there we go. So now we've got a 600 pixel puppy image container. It's invisible. We can make it real, which I'm going to, just because otherwise this gets hard to follow sometimes. Okay, that's our puppy image container. Our puppy's at the top. As soon as we put vertical line middle on this guy, it works. So vertical line middle is like vertical line me relative to my display table parent, my direct parent. It can't be an ancestor, right? That's what vertical line means. So that's the classic way. You can use Flexbox to do the same thing, but no matter what, the key comes back to the fact that like this puppy image container has a height, and until I gave it a height, there was no reason to be vertically middling it in the first place. I believe that if you had two puppies in here, that they would actually be centered in a logical way. So like I think if we copied this and then we pasted it, apparently I'm quite wrong. What do I understand? I know that image has to be display block for this to work. And then I can look at, okay, what am I trying to do right now? I am vertically aligning two things within their parent. What am I expecting to happen really? Right? Why don't, instead of that, why don't I take these two puppy images, put them inside of here? And because this is the thing this is the display table cell. This is the display table. Why don't I just take the thing that does the vertical middling, have that be only one thing, and then put the guts inside of it, right? And that solves the problem. So when in doubt, try to use the simplest possible solution.
Yeah.
Let's imagine we want a puppy side by side. Okay. We want it. We want it right now. Okay, and then puppy image container has been removed. All right, this is our puppy image. There it is. It's display block, which means it's off to the left. Okay, so what's one way I can make it be centered?
Margin auto.
Exactly correct. That is way number one. Another way I could center this image is to change it to be display inline, get rid of this unnecessary thing. and then just refresh because I have a text align center already up somewhere else. If I didn't have that and I didn't want to poison my whole document with that thing, I could make a puppy image container again, put text align center on the puppy image container, right? And then same approach.
Oh,
Whenever
yes.
you want to, whenever you hit that problem, you can solve it that way. I could delete it altogether because I don't already have a rule making a display block somewhere else, and it defaults to display inline in the browser. Images often have fixed widths, and it's appropriate for them to have the fixed widths. So watch what happens when I make the screen smaller. I've got two display inline puppies side by side. They're display inline and they're side by side. Why are they side by side?
Display inline. Is it the default flow?
Normal flow text, because they're
Normal flow,
text right
yeah.
now. This is just like the
Text.
letter A, except it's a puppy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that works great, but then because it's text, what happens to text when you resize your browser?
It's wrapping.
Wraps. What's the easiest solution to this problem? If I don't want it to do that, I want there to be a scroll bar down at the bottom. I want to scroll left and right through my puppies. So by default, it's doing overflow auto.
Oh.
So the reason is not that it needs overflow. The reason is that by default, puppy container is 100% width, right?
Oh, okay.
And its parent body is 100% width of its parent, the HTML, which is 100% width of the visible viewport, or of the window in this case.
Okay, I understand.
So a way to make this not happen would be, okay, this thing that the puppies are inside is going to have a width, and in that way, like nothing can shrink that width is set.
Yeah.
Why do we have floats? I should explain. I forget every fucking time.
So
What is the thing what's the
so
problem
say, like,
that
each
causes
of these
this?
puppies has a caption, and so it's like you want the caption to be directly underneath the puppy, and then like when you resize the page, you want it to stay underneath the proper puppy.
Leona's sister Marge, Leona's brother David. Okay, so we've got some work to do on our captions. They're display inline because I did spans for some reason, but I'll do divs instead, and that'll like push them onto their own little deal. But now they're divs, and it's starting to get to the point where, like, thinking about this as text is starting to be less great, right? I could make a separate wrapper. I could put dog and caption within a div. I could make those divs display inline if I wanted, right? And then they would be right next to each other. Puppy image with caption is going to be a div. There's our puppy, another puppy image with caption, and we are then about good. So puppy image with caption. Now for our images, we'll leave them like they were, but puppy image with caption is going to be display inline instead of display block, which it would be by default because it's a div. What did I do wrong? Change this to a span, right? Well, first of all, notice like it behaved real weird in a way I couldn't even explain with what just happened. So you don't put blocked elements inside of inline elements. That makes sense. Inline elements are things like italics. You can put bold inside of italics, but you can't put a div inside of italics. Okay, so then we'll just change these divs here to spans so that everything inside is an inline element. But we're already getting to the point where it's crazy and annoying. Like having to make these captions, we're relying on display inline to be able to center these puppy caption blocks. But we can't center the puppy caption blocks right now with the knowledge we have today using margin 0 auto. Okay, if we wanted to try, let's see what happens. So we'll say puppy image with caption it's display block by default, right? Just to make it easier to follow, we're going to say that the image is now display block. We're going to say that the captions are themselves divs, so they're going to be display block. So image and div are now display block inside. So Leona's sister Marge is oh my gosh. Puppy caption do wrong? Oh, because it's just called caption. Well, we'll call it puppy caption. I'm sorry. All right. Div, right? It's a div. This is a div. It's line center. Okay, so why the puppy is on the left right now? So puppy image with caption. That's our little wrapper thingy. Puppy caption. Okay, all good. So if we set a width for puppy image with caption, let's say that it's going to also be 500 pixels. That's all adding up.
Not bad.
So if we wanted to center one of these puppies, no problem, right? I know how to center a puppy. We're just going to go to, let's say there's only one, or we'll just give it a second class, or I'll do an inline style just because I'm lazy, okay? I'm going to say margin 0 auto. Well, that one's centered.
Yep.
What if I wanted to be centered side by side? So we'd have to make all of their contents be displayed inline and use this text hack, or think of something else, which is either going to be display inline block or float. So, all right, nicely done, guys. Pleasure. Thank you for answering all my questions.